Tonight, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our extra special guest on the show, a man armed with an incredible amount of academic credentials, knowledge, and spiritual wisdom. None other than Bruce Lipton. Welcome to the show, Bruce.
Matthew, I so appreciate this wonderful opportunity, especially because we're going through some very exciting times.
Very exciting times indeed, Bruce. Things are rapidly changing worldwide and speeding up at an ever-quickening pace, and many people are awakening to the truth. And I think your work is absolutely fantastic in that it gives solutions and allows people to elevate through these times of turmoil.
Well, for me, it's very exciting because I started my career and was a university professor in a medical school, teaching the conventional wisdom about how genes control life. And as a consequence, if you believe that, and this is what I was teaching, then realize this: as far as we know, we didn't pick the genes we came with. And if we don't like our traits, we can't change the genes. And there all of a sudden you start to realize that the genes control us, and we're more or less victims of our heredity. So if there's cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes running in your family, then we're programmed to believe that we are going to likely get those same kinds of diseases as a result of genes controlling our life. But what's really interesting, Matthew, is that in the process of teaching this to medical students, and here's the problem, just basically it says this, I'm teaching this to medical students, and this is how they ultimately, as doctors, relate to patients, is to tell a patient, for example, that their issues are controlled by their genes, and that they themselves do not influence their genes, and as a result, we make them victims, and then we also make them need a rescuer, and that becomes something like the pharmaceutical industry, who is very happy to stand in there and say, look, for a certain amount of money, I'll rescue you from your bad genes. Yeah. And what we're seeing is it's the most destructive form of healthcare in the entire world. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies are basically an unfortunate situation, and from my perspective, basically very immoral. For a very important reason, is that we call ourselves humans based on humanity, and the fundamental characteristic of humanity is compassion. And I say, well, great, let's talk about the healing industry, which is supposedly all built on compassion, and then you end up with this big corporate entity called Big Pharma, running the show, and then immediately you say, well, it's a corporation, and I go, yeah, and I say the basic fundamental pursuit of a corporation is to make money for its shareholders, otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so I say, well, cool. So I say the pharmaceutical industry is here to make money first, and anything else second. And why is this a problem? Well, I say, well, look, the pharmaceutical company is saying, I got drugs to heal you, and then I say, if they actually gave us drugs that healed us, how would that play into the corporate business plan? The answer, it would totally mess it all up, because if you got healed, then what do I need the drugs for anymore? So we're looking at a situation that we have an industry that does not want to heal you, because if it does, then the industry falls on its face, and then the whole thing is over with. So we have an industry that actually is almost trying to make everybody an addict, and especially here in the United States, I can't believe the number of people that are taking 4, 5, or 6 prescription drugs every day. And it's like, when do they end? And the fact is, no, they never end. You take them for your whole life. And it's like, oh my God, they got a pharmaceutical monkey on their back. And here's the other part that's why it's immoral, because not only is it against the business plan to heal you, but it becomes immoral because I say, well, who are you making money from? And the answer is from sick people. I thought, oh my God, sick people are already kicked and on the ground already, and now you come over there and kick them again to squeeze a profit out of them. They're already being punished by their illness, and it's like, this is why healthcare legitimately should be a non-profit organization, because it's designed to help people, not punish them. And the fact of punishment is no greater seen than here in the States, where this is a real number. 60% of Americans that go bankrupt to pay healthcare bills. So basically, here's a system that's supposed to be helping people. In the end, this country and many, many countries in the West are under a burden of a tremendous healthcare bill. And the reason why this bill is so high is because the corporate care healthcare system does not actually want to heal you because, as I said, it loses its business plan. So we're paying higher and higher fees. I just found out like a family of four in the United States 10 years ago paid $9,000 a year for health care. And today it's $19,000 for the same family of four.
Gosh.
And that's $19,000 out of somebody's budget just for healthcare. So like, okay, we got a problem. And here's why I get excited about what I do. And that is, I was cloning stem cells while I was teaching those medical students about genes controlling life. And what that means is I would take one single stem cell and put it into a tissue culture dish all by itself, and the cell divides every 10 or 12 hours. And what happens is after about a week or two, I have thousands of cells in the Petri dish, and yet here's the most important fact. All cells are genetically identical because they came from the same parent. Now, the experiment begins with this. I take some of the cells out of that main stem cell dish and put them in another Petri dish with a different environment, a different culture medium. Cells are like fish. They have to live in fluid. That's why when you cut yourself and fluids start to run out, that's like an internal aquarium because your fish need to live in that. And I say, well, when I take the cells out of the body, I have to sort of give them the same kind of environment that they're living in. So I create an environment, culture medium, we call it, put it in a culture dish, and here's what I do. I change some of the composition of the chemistry a little bit, and what happens is I take some of these cells out, put them in a dish by themselves with a different environment, and the cells form muscle. And I say, no, wait, go back to the very same stem cell dish, take more of the genetically identical cells out, put them in another small Petri dish, change the environment again, and with a different environment, the cells form bone. And I go, wait, go back to the same stem cell dish, take more out, put it in a third Petri dish and a different environment, and the cells form fat cells. And then I say, okay, look, what controls the fate of the cells? And the first thing is this. They were all genetically identical.
Yeah.
The only thing that changed was the environment. And when I change the environment, I change the fate of the cells, and that's a given fact of science, and it's a new science. It's actually what most everyone in this world has learned is called genetic control, which simply means control by genes. The new science, and this is work that I actually started in 1967, so that was like 44 years ago when I was cloning these stem cells. The new science is called epigenetics.
Okay.
And epigenetics, epi means above. So if I explain the new science, I say it's called epigenetic control. And I say, what does that mean? I say control above the genes. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you say, well, wait a minute, the genes didn't control. I go, no. And after all the years of being told that genes turn on and genes turn off and genes control all our functions, the truth is that all those claims are totally false.
Right.
Genes are blueprints. That's the first thing. Let me explain that.
Okay.
Why is it important? It's a blueprint to make the protein parts of the body, like the building blocks of the body. And so when you look in the mirror and see yourself, you're seeing a machine essentially made out of protein parts. So the cells are made out of proteins, and the different protein parts give us our different traits and our characteristics, not just our physical characteristics, but our behavioral characteristics. Okay. So now I say, the proteins give you your traits. And I say, yeah, but we have about 150,000 different kinds of proteins. And I say, because these proteins wear out, you have to replace them a lot and you have to make them. I say, where do you get them from? And I say, the genes are blueprints to make the proteins. So I go, okay, so the genes then make the proteins and the proteins give us our traits. I go, absolutely right so far. And then I say, but here's the problem. As blueprints, there's no such thing as an on and off. And why that's important is I say, well, look, go to an architect's office and she's working on a blueprint. You lean over her shoulder. You ask her, you say, is your blueprint on or off? And she'll look at you like, what are you talking about? There's no on and off. And it's basically it's just a blueprint. Well, a gene is exactly the same thing.
Right.
Point. Genes can't turn on. Genes can't turn off. Genes make no decisions. Genes have no awareness. So basically, after all these years of saying we're controlled by genes, the fact is, no, genes are blueprints. If blueprints behave the way we say genes do, then an architect could drive by a building site, throw the blueprints into the lot, drive away, and come back a month later, and there's the building. You say, yeah, the blueprints built it. It's like, no.
Yeah.
And so now I come back and I say, okay, how do the blueprints work? Well, now we know that they're read by a system, so that there's a contractor in your body. So now I'm going to back up 1 second because I'm going to tell you this about our human body. So everything is going to make sense in a minute. We'll put all the pieces together, and it goes like this. When you look in the mirror, Matthew, and you see yourself, you see one individual human looking back. We say, oh, yeah, here's one biological organism, me, looking back at myself. And I go, okay, first mistake. The mistake is this, that you are not a one thing. You're actually made out of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living things. When I say me or you say Matthew to yourself, you're a voice speaking for 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entities. The human body is a community of 50 trillion cells, okay?
Yeah.
Now, why is that irrelevant? Because I'm going to tell you, here's the next interesting thing. It goes, you in real life are a skin-covered petri dish. Inside, under your skin, are 50 trillion cells, and there's a culture medium in there called the blood. So whether I'm talking about cells in a plastic dish with culture medium or cells in your skin-covered human body culture dish with blood as a culture medium, they operate exactly the same. So I go back to my culture dish with my stem cells and I say, look, I change the environment and I make muscle cells or bone cells or fat cells based on the signals that I put into the culture medium. I go, cool. And here's another very important fact. I take my plastic dish with stem cells, I move it from the good environment that I create, move it into a less than optimum environment, and the cells get sick.
Yeah.
And then you would say, oh my God, Bruce, what kind of drugs should you give your cells? And I go, that's the point. To make the cells well, you don't give them any drugs. You take them from the bad environment, move it into the good environment, and immediately the cells will begin to heal. And then I say, okay, so what does that mean about a human? I go, well, look, you're a skin-covered petri dish, and what's the point? When you get sick, it's not because you've been programmed, your cells are programmed to be sick. Your cells are responding to your environment. Your sickness is actually your body complementing the nature of the environment. So your body is like reading back your environment. When you are sick, basically says you're not in a healthy environment. And that rather than taking drugs, you have to start to say, how do I return to a healthy environment again? Because the drugs will impede or get in the way of the healing.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is this. Recognizing that cells are sick does not mean that cells are bad. Inherently, something's wrong with them. It means that the environment they're in is not supporting full health. And therefore, it says if you want to be healthy, then you have to find how do you make the environment. Now, we got that part. So we have your skin-covered petri dish, your cells are in there. The fate of your cells is a reflection of how you respond to the environment. Now I go, okay, what is it in the environment that will influence the health of my cells? And I go, well, the first thing, there's two things that we can just talk about right away. Number one is the food that we eat. We're building a body with food, and the building blocks that come from the food are going to be used in our body. So here's the point. If we're not eating well, if we're got processed foods with a lot of chemicals and stuff in there which were never designed to be in a human body, and you put that chemistry into your body, you're going to pollute the culture medium and the interior of the body. And when you pollute the interior body, the cells will get sick because they're complementing that bad environment. So number one, we should do all the best things we can to eat organic, get out of all this agribusiness chemistry, genetic engineering. All that stuff is really not natural for a human body. If you put those things in a tissue culture, you'd kill the cells. So basically, we should be back on the straight and narrow because we've been manipulated by the agribusiness industry, which is like the pharmaceutical industry, is there to make money, and making food without quality is a lot cheaper than making food with quality. So we're not getting the best for ourselves. But then I say, okay, well that's influential. But now I want to tell you the most influential control of our health and our behavior. And this is what it is. It's very simple. It's our perceptions of life. And you go, well, how does that work? I mean, how does my mind, which has visions, change my biology? And I go like this. Remember, the blood in your body is the culture medium. And remember that when you change the composition of the culture medium, you change the fate of the cells. And then I say, yeah, but what controls the chemistry of the blood? And I go, the brain. The brain releases all these different kinds of chemical transmitters that go through the body, and they're released into the culture medium, and they feed the cells. So whatever signals are coming from the brain are like when I would change the signals in my tissue culture dish in the culture medium, I change the signals, I change the fate of the cells. Well, here's a simple point. Your blood is your culture medium. The chemical composition of your blood is based on your perceptions of life and how you respond to life. I just use this slide in my lecture. I know we're not obviously in a visual, but maybe people can imagine this. You go into a paint store, and there's this wall with all the little paint chips with all the different colors. So visualize, there you are in front of all these colors that span the entire spectrum: reds, greens, blues, all those colors, all different shades. And I go, how do you make those different colors? And I say, well, there's a little machine over there with these different tints, and you add a little bit of this color tint and a little bit of this and this. You add them to the white paint, and when you have the right formula, you can create any color that's on those chips. And now I go, well, now what does that relate to me? And I go, well, colors are like emotions. So I'd say, when you're cool and cold, you got blue colors, and when you're hot and passionate, you got red colors. And then they talk about envy as a green color, and all these different colors. So imagine your emotions as color chips. And I say, yeah, but how do you make the colors? And I say, well, the brain is like the paint mixer, and there are different chemicals that are released by the brain, and they're just like like the tints in the machine. You can mix them in right proportions and change the final color. So I say, so the brain releases these little emotional chemicals in the right ratios, and they can give us the entire spectrum of complete joy and happiness and bliss to total depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies. Those are all the result of the emotional chemicals. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now I say, okay, well, what determines which emotional chemicals are released? And I go, the emotional chemicals the brain releases are based on the mind and the mind's interpretation of the world.
And this is key, isn't it?
Excuse me?
This is key, isn't it? This part.
Oh, yeah. This is the ultimate key, because it says this. I'll give two examples, so like two different extremes, okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, first example. So you're sitting there and your eyes are closed, and all of a sudden I say, open your eyes, and right in front of you is someone you love, someone you're so attached to and so in love. Yeah. And I say, the moment your mind perceives that one, your mind releases chemicals into the blood, which are the chemicals that you can feel love by. And they're like dopamine, which is a pleasure chemical. When you put dopamine in the system, you feel good about yourself, okay? Yeah. Oxytocin is a bonding chemical. That's the one that says, that's the person I want to be with. There's other people there, but when I see her, I release oxytocin, which is a bonding chemical, into my blood. I release hormones such as serotonin and growth hormones. I say, well, what are all those different chemicals doing? I say, well, when you're in love and you feel great and you feel top of the world because you're just like, banging on all cylinders, everything's great. And I say, well, how do you feel this way? How come you're so healthy? And the answer is the emotional chemicals released by the brain when love is the picture, which include dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, growth hormone. These chemicals, if I put them in my petri dish, the cells will grow and flourish and be healthy and vibrant. And I go, cool, that's what happens in your body. That's why when you feel in love, you feel it throughout your entire body. You feel energized and you feel healthy and you're ready to go. And I say, yeah, because you're releasing those emotional chemicals into the bloodstream, which becomes the culture medium, and feeds your cells these spectacular things, and that excites you and gives you health. Okay, that's great. So I say, well, that's one example. But I say, go back to sitting down, eyes closed, and I say, this time, though, when you open up your eyes, there's something that threatens you or scares you. I go, well, now you're going to release all different kinds of chemicals from the brain. Now you release stress hormones. Now you release cortisol. Now you release these inflammatory agents that get the body all set to prepare for fight or flight. And I go, yeah, but those chemicals in the blood have a completely different effect on the genetics and the behavior of your cells than the chemicals I said when you're in love. Matter of fact, if you are under stress, the chemicals that are released in your blood, their function is to get you ready for fight or flight. I mean, that's what a stress response is. Something's threatening you.
Yeah.
And so basically it says, get ready to run. Well, to get ready to run, the body has to change the energy system, because when you're in a growth, like when you were in that love phase, the body was using the energy to grow the cells and keep the healthy system, get the immune system kicked up, get the body in top form. And so that chemistry was directing the body's energy for growth and maintenance of the body. But now I say, wait, a lion's chasing me. It's like, well, wait. I better not spend the money, the energy on the growth and all that stuff. I need all the energy to run away from the lion. So the hormones that are released into the blood when you're in fear actually shut down the growth mechanisms of the body to conserve energy, getting ready you for fight or flight. You got to run. And the immune system is also, if you're in stress because of some threat from the outside, like a lion or Al-Qaeda or whatever you want to be afraid of, when you're a threat from the outside, you don't need to expend the large amount of energy that the immune system uses every day. So if you're running away from a lion, the stress hormones that you're releasing in the body actually shut off your immune system to conserve energy so you could run away from that lion. And these are normal practical things throughout history. I mean, this is the way the body works. When you're not in stress, the body's in growth and health. And when you're in stress, you allocate the energy for running away. But in the history, this is what's different about today versus history. A long time ago, let's say you were chased by a lion. If you escaped from the lion, then all of a sudden you say, okay, everything's back to normal. We go back into growth again. So the fight or flight is only used for short pulses very infrequently. So, and the reason why is, look how taxing it is to the body. If you're in fight or flight, you're not growing, you're not making energy, you're not taking care of your body, you're shutting down the immune system. But that's okay if you have to run from the lion. But once you get away from the lion, you have to return back. Otherwise, if you stay in that stress mode, you'll kill the system. And you'll kill it because you're not supporting its growth and its maintenance, and the immune system is shut down. So I go, well, that was the way nature designed the system. But look at our world today. Today, our world is 24/7, 365, stress every day. People are concerned about their survival, their economy, whether they're going to keep the job. All these different things they're concerned about. And I go, oh, well, now there's the problem. Here's the problem. And that's it. That as long as you're releasing stress hormones into the system, you are continuously inhibiting the immune system and continuously shunting or stopping the growth mechanisms. And you say, well, yeah, but I'm an adult. I don't need to grow. And I go, every day you lose hundreds of billions of cells that die from old age or wear out or broken down. And every day you have to repair and replace them. So I don't care how old you are, you have to grow every day, hundreds of billions of cells. So if you are living in a stressed world like we're living in today, then you are compromising your health, number one, because you're inhibiting the growth of the body and not putting energy into maintaining it. And that's why we start to break down more easily, start getting chronic issues of chronic diseases. More importantly, as I said, when you're being chased by that tiger, the immune system is not very helpful at that moment, because that energy helps you from threats from the inside, like bacteria and viruses. So a lion definitely does. We don't need the immune system running from the lion. So when we shut off the immune system, we are now open to infections of every kind. And that's why people under stress get sicker all the time. So now I go back and I say, okay, look, we're living in a world. Health issues are number one, big primary issues, especially in Western civilization. And the significance about that is, does that mean our bodies are weak and frail and vulnerable and they're just breaking down under normal use? The answer is no. They're breaking down because of our responses to the world that we live in and our beliefs about our safety and who we are, and our, just the belief that from the medical arena that we're vulnerable and frail creatures, that viruses and bacteria are going to eat us and we need to take all their drugs. And those are belief systems.
Yeah.
Those are total belief systems. How powerful really are we? And the idea is this: we're so powerful that, and many people do this, walk across hot coals. We're so powerful. I have a number of articles from newspapers around the world about women who can lift up a car when a child is trapped underneath a car in an accident.
Gosh.
And the relevance about that is, my God, weightlifters can't really lift up the car. And here's a woman just, with just the need to lift the car because of her child lifting the car. So it says, she's not genetically different than you and I. We could lift a car. It's just our belief system says we can't. But under that point, that belief system doesn't work for her. She's going to get her child out regardless of the belief system. So she overrides it. And then here's an interesting one. Here in the United States, we got some weirdos down in the south of the United States, fundamentalist Christians that work themselves up into religious ecstasy and do all kinds of weird stuff, testifying that God protects them. I say, well, how do you testify that God protects you? Well, some of them handle very poisonous snakes, and they get bitten all the time, but they have no problems from the snake bites. But those are the little guys compared to the ones that I want to talk about. The ones that I think are amazing is they testify that God protects them by drinking strychnine poison. And the most amazing thing is this: that regardless of their, how much strychnine poison they drink, they have no harmful consequences from drinking poison.
Gosh.
And you say, well, wait, how can that be? And the answer is their belief system is so powerful that it means that you can absolutely eat poison, you can walk across fire, and you can lift up a car. That's how powerful we are, except all of us, if you ask somebody, can you do these things? Most people say no. I say, well, how come you believe that? And the answer is, we were programmed that way.
Yeah. The actual title of the talk that I've got noted down here is actually deprogramming and reprogramming, because it is really about shedding down the mental constructs that we've been kind of embedded with over the years, and reprogramming that we do have the potential to elevate. And the key is the belief and the perception we apply.
Yeah. Well, this is why I went on to the belief stuff first. Why does belief make a difference? The answer is belief changes the brain chemistry, which changes the culture medium, which then controls the fate of the cells. As you change your beliefs, you release different chemistry and affect your life. And then I say, as you brought up, where do we get our beliefs from? And here's the interesting part. Nature, in creating sperm and egg for reproductions of humans, doesn't know what the future is going to be. So if I say, okay, here's a sperm for you, Matthew, you can use this when you're 25 years old. And it's like, well, nature doesn't know what's going to happen in 25 years. Why is that important? Because if the environment changes, the cell will have to change its genetics to accommodate the environment. So basically nature says, well, I can't tell you what the future is going to be. So here's what nature did. It created a system to allow a sperm and egg to come together, and then allow the child, or the fetus in this stage, to be programmed by the parents in regard to what's going on in the world at the time the sperm and egg are coming together. Yeah. And this way nature says, cool, I don't have to pre-program it. I'll let the programming occur live time. So the conventional sperm and egg are generic in a sense of what environment should they grow up in. But by the time they come together in a conception, here's what happens. Remember I talked about the chemistry of the culture medium changing the fate of the cells? Yeah. Well, the mother's blood is the culture medium that feeds the fetus. Mm-hmm. And then what that means is that then whatever's going on in her blood and controlling her biology is actually controlling the biology and the genetics of the fetus. So if she lives in a war-torn world and she's living under a lot of stress, then she's going to change the genetics of her child so that it could be a street fighter and survive in a world of stress. So by the way she responds to the world, she adjusts her chemistry. That chemistry crosses into placenta and adjusts the chemistry of the fetus. So nature actually says the mother is like nature's Head Start program, because the mother is experiencing the world that the baby's going to live in. And so she, by her response to that world, sends the chemistry of her blood to the fetus, which adjusts the genetics of her fetus and the behavior of her fetus. Because if the mother has behavior patterns then the chemistry of those behavior patterns are playing over and over again. The fetus is recording the pattern. So we now know that 50% of our personality is already programmed before we're born. Because we learn the patterns that our mother is going through, which, but according to nature, if everybody knew their job and the mother knew that she was programming her child, then she would be very wary of how she responds to the world, because she's changing the genetics. So it's very interesting. And this is not to leave the father out. Obviously, if the father screws up, it changes the mother's response to the world. And so the parents, by their response to the world, simply are controlling the genetics of the fetus so that the fetus can best fit the environment the parents are responding to. Nature's way, very smart. But the problem is, what if the parents have a misperception about the world? What if we hold so many fears like we hold right now about the world, and a woman was pregnant? Well, those fears of the world that she sees will be transferred to that child. And so basically, babies have a lot of programming before they're born, and this is very important for people who are involved with being adopted, or people who are adopting a child, to recognize that your child's not a blank slate. Even if you got it just as a newborn, it's not a blank slate. It already came with programming, and if a child's up for adoption, I'm pretty sure that programming was not very supportive of that child in the first place. And that's why we have errors, because a lot of adopting parents think, oh, well, I'll raise the child with my beliefs and my way of life, so it doesn't make a difference. It's like, it's already been programmed a lot. Okay, but now we program a certain amount of this child's biology and genetics before it's born. But here comes the next part. When a child is born into the family, it has to adapt to the culture and customs of the family. And since culture and customs are also not programmable, then the system in biology was designed to download the new customs and the new culture and the new beliefs, because they're always changing from one part of history to the next part. So you can't pre-program that. So the child's brain, now this is really interesting, is different from the adult brain in this way. An adult, if I put wires on your head, Matthew, and read your EEG activity, I can read your brain frequencies. And what I can tell you very simply is we have a whole range of very low to very high frequencies as adults. And they represent different things. The lowest frequency is called delta. That's like sleeping or unconscious. The next one up is called theta. That's like when you're just waking up in the morning and you're half awake and half asleep, theta. Alpha, the next higher frequency, is sort of calm consciousness. And then beta, a higher frequency, is the kind of brain activity like when we're doing schoolwork or working on our jobs and stuff like that. So during the day, we're usually bouncing around between alpha and beta. And then at night, we go back down to sleep. We pass through theta and into delta, and we're out unconscious. And I go, okay, so an adult has all these different ranges of activity. Now, here comes an interesting fact. When a child is born, it doesn't have the higher frequency waves. It's basically delta and theta.
Right.
And those are very low frequencies. And in fact, theta is a hypnagogic trance. Theta, if I want to hypnotize you, I have to drop your brain frequencies into a lower frequency like theta. And theta, that's like hypnosis. So whatever I say goes straight into your subconscious mind. Okay?
Yeah.
Well, here's the point. A child is predominantly in theta for the first 6 years of its life.
Wow.
And in fact, it doesn't really express the level of consciousness until after 6. And consciousness is creative thinking, okay? So before consciousness, a child is like a video recorder. It's downloading everything it hears and sees and is recording everything. So the first 6 years of a child's life, its brain is designed to download and observe the parents. So if you're a boy, you focus on your father and you focus on every bit of his behavior. You study him and record him, so much so that if your father dies by the time you're 6 years old, when you grow up, you'll still be like your father, because by then you've already downloaded your father's behaviors, okay? And if you're a girl, you do the same thing for your mother, and then you learn the rules of family and understanding siblings and law and order, so to speak, in your family, and then you learn about the community. And the first 6 years, a child is being downloaded with beliefs about the world.
Yeah.
And these go straight into the subconscious mind. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the reason for this, as I said very basically, is that as a child, you have to learn like a million things to fit into society. And the nature designed the brain to be in a record mode for 6 years. So basically, it makes it real easy for a child to learn things. That's why, like, a child, let's say a 3-year-old child, can live in a family where 3 languages are spoken. And that 3-year-old will actually identify and be able to speak each of the 3 languages without even confusing the vocabulary. It's just like they can learn 3 languages at the same time. That's how the hypnosis works. But then I say, now take an 8-year-old child and try and teach it 1 new language. And all of a sudden you find it's very difficult for an 8-year-old just to learn 1 new language, but a 3-year-old can do 3 languages. And I go, the difference is the 8-year-old is trying to work with a conscious mind. The 3-year-old is just recording stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like super learning. Okay, so now I say, okay, so all of us are born, and what do we learn? We learn about all the rules to be in the family, in the community, in the nation. We learn all the rules, who we like, who we don't like, what we can do, what we can't do. And we learn it not with our conscious mind. We learn it with our subconscious programming. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, but basically what I want people to understand is this. We also, at that same time, get what we call a self-identity. Who are we? I mean, who are you, Matthew, according to you? Who are you? And the answer is, where'd you get information about who you are? And then it comes back from our parents and our family. They tell us who we are. You're a smart and lovable, wonderful child. Or, who do you think you are? You don't deserve that, Billy. You're not that smart, Mary. And the thing is, what the psychologists tell us, 70% of a lot of this program is negative programming. And so now I'm telling us, okay, first 6 years, you're being downloaded with programs. You're observing your parents and listening to everything they say about the world and about you. And if they tell you you're a sickly child, you're not a lovable child, or you're not good at art, or whatever these things they want to say, if they say that to you before you're 6, that's not going into your conscious mind. That's going straight down your subconscious program. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, at 6, you start exercising consciousness, and that's where your mind starts to become on its own, like a little creative at that point. Okay? Now, let's explain this right away. The mind has 2 parts, conscious and subconscious. They're 2 different parts. They learn in 2 different ways, and they don't necessarily talk to each other, and this is where the problems come from. And it goes like this. The conscious mind is the part of the mind that's the new part of the brain just behind your forehead. It's called the prefrontal cortex. It's the latest evolution of the brain. The conscious mind is creative. The conscious mind is not time-bound, meaning, Matthew, what are you going to do next week? If you have an answer, then you're creating something that hasn't happened yet, right? Your conscious mind comes up with that. And your conscious mind is the one that can think about next week and move into next week. And your conscious mind is the one that can go back in your history and say, what did you do last year? And the conscious mind can just disconnect from the moment and go up in your head as you solve a problem in your head. Conscious mind, therefore, is movable. It can move to the future. It can move to the past. It could disconnect from the current moment and go up in your head. And I go, okay, so it's a creative mind, and it's not time-bound. And in contrast, the subconscious mind is always in the present moment. The subconscious mind doesn't see a history and a future. The conscious mind is just programs that are running in the current moment. The conscious mind has habits in it. It has things that we have learned how to do. And once you learn how to do them, you don't have to do them again. And this is the great benefit of the subconscious mind. A lot of people say, oh, the subconscious mind is evil. And it's like, no, it's not. The subconscious mind is the equivalent of a tape recorder with tapes in it. And I say, well, why is that important? Because tape recorder's not bad or good. It's just a tape recorder. But the programs could be bad or good.
Yeah.
So rather than blaming the subconscious mind, the first thing is don't blame the mind. That's just recording whatever the data is. So then I say, well, where'd you get the programs of your subconscious mind? Well, you learn them from habits. You learn the basic programs before 6 years of age. They were just downloaded straight into your mind, being in your family.
Yeah.
After you're 6, you add new programs, but by repeating things over and over again. So you want to learn ABC, you have to say A, B, C, D, E, F, G over and over, repeat it until you have it. Okay, you got a habit, now it's in the subconscious, you don't need to do it again. You learn how to walk. When you were an infant, you had to learn how to walk. But today you don't have to know how to walk. It's built into the subconscious mind, knows how to do that. Driving a car. If you never drove a car before and you got in the car, you wouldn't know how to drive the car. So you practice and you practice, and then you make it a habit, so that today, if you've been driving a car for a number of years, you get in the car, you don't think about the details of driving. It's automatic.
Yeah.
You don't have habit. So subconscious mind, habit, learns from experiences that are repeated, only stays in the present moment for a very important reason, and the reason is this. The conscious mind travels. If you start thinking about the future, who's going to take care of the current moment? And the answer is the subconscious mind. So that means you could be walking down the street thinking about where you're going next week, but all your muscles are controlled, and you didn't walk into the telephone pole, and everything was cool because your subconscious mind was or was controlling that. Or give another example. An example is, now that you've been driving the car for a long time, and this is going to come back for a point we're going to make. You've been driving the car a long time. You get in the car. You have a passenger get in the car. You start getting in a conversation. You're driving down the street. The conversation becomes so hot and heavy that you get so involved in the conversation that at some point you look out the window and realize you have not paid attention to the road for the last 5 or 10 minutes. And I go, okay, there's a very important lesson about this, and here's what the lesson is. Number one, when your conscious mind is redirected to do something else, all the other jobs are run by the subconscious mind, including driving the car. And don't worry about it, because the subconscious mind as a machine is 1,000,000 times more powerful an information processor than the conscious mind. So subconscious is much more capable of taking care of you than even your conscious mind is, if you have the right programs. And so I go, okay, so you're driving, you've had a conversation, your subconscious was driving the car, your conscious was involved with the conversation, and the next part of this is very critical. I say, can you tell me what was in your conversation? And you go, yeah, I talked about this and that and that and that. And I go, good. Then I say, can you tell me what happened on the road for the last 5 or 10 minutes? And you go, no, I wasn't paying attention to that. I was in the conversation. So now here's what the point is. When you're operating and your conscious mind's not paying attention, the subconscious will do all the programs it's been trained how to do, which includes your job, even talking to somebody. You can talk to somebody just automatically, and your conscious mind could wander, okay? And yet, when your conscious mind is not paying attention, then you're playing programs from your subconscious mind, okay? You got that?
Yeah.
But you also don't observe it. And so when I tell my audiences, I give them the story, I say, look, you have a friend that you know very well. You know your friend's behavior very well. You happen to know your friend's parent. And you recognize that your friend shares some of the same behaviors that their parent has. So one day you casually volunteer. You say, hey, Bill, you're just like your dad. And that's when you back away from Bill, because Bill is like, goes ballistic. How can you compare me to my dad? And I say there's 2 very profound points from this story. And profound point number 1, everyone else can see that Bill behaves like his dad. Only Bill doesn't see it. Point, that you don't see your own subconscious behaviors. That's the same thing about driving a car. Very important point. And the other very profound point about that same story about having the behaviors of your parents is that we're all Bill. Every one of us has been programmed by our parents. Every one of us is habitually doing those programs while our conscious mind's not paying attention. And when we play those programs, we don't see them. So it basically says, just like Bill, we probably engage in a lot of behaviors that we don't observe. And they're not even our behaviors because they were programmed by observing our parents. So they're not your behavior, they're your father's or your mother's behavior. Okay. I think we have enough pieces now to make the final story here. And it goes like this, Matthew. We have 2 minds. The conscious mind's creative. Subconscious mind's got programs in it. The subconscious mind programs, every time you push the button, will play the same program over and over and over again. That's why it's called a habit. Okay? That the fundamental programs in your subconscious mind are not yours. They came from your family. So that means when you're not paying attention with your conscious mind, you're running habits, and the basic habits you're running are actually not even yours, but you're running other people's habits. So they're not supporting you necessarily. That means when you're not being conscious of what's going on, you could be generally playing habits that are like shooting yourself in the foot and never know that you're the one that's causing the problem to yourself. Nobody else is, but you don't see it. Okay? Now comes the scary fact that neuroscience has revealed, and that is we're only conscious of our lives about 5% of the time.
5%, gosh.
5% is from your creative conscious mind. Let me tell you about your conscious mind. That's the one that has your wishes, your desires, your aspirations of what you want from life. It has your positive thinking. I go, cool. All those wonderful things that you want, those are from your conscious mind with what you want, only work 5% of the day. 95% of the day we're doing the automatic programs from the subconscious mind. And you go, that seems like so inverted. It's like I'm only going where I want to go 5% of the time. I'm going, yes. And I say, why? And the answer is, because remember I told you your conscious mind's not time bound. And that's why our minds are continuously moving, flitting from thought to thought to thought. But when they're in these thoughts, they're not paying attention. And so it turns out 95% of the time, the conscious mind's not paying attention. And that means that 95% of the time we're playing our subconscious behaviors and we don't see them. And when you don't see them, that means you could be sabotaging yourself, disempowering yourself, limiting yourself without any awareness that you're doing it because you don't even see it.
And this is where the reprogramming comes in, isn't it? Because, there's got to be a way of breaking this down and reprogramming it,
Absolutely, and these programs are so critical because these behaviors shape our lives. Okay, and the issue is this: the first thing is this. So you were programmed in the womb. Half your personality got programmed there, and the first 6 years of your life. Well, especially the first couple of years, you were downloading a lot of information. You have no idea what those programs are. If I ask you, tell me about the programs in your subconscious mind, you go, I don't know. I wasn't really here when they were being programmed. So I go, but I can tell you what the programs are, and you can tell your own what your programs are very simply for this reason. Science has revealed that 95% of our life comes from the subconscious. Simple point. Your life is a printout of your subconscious programs. And I say, so what does that mean? And it gets very simple. It goes like this. It says, what comes easy for you comes easy because your subconscious programs support that. Anything you struggle with in your life, whether it's struggles to be healthy or struggles to have a relationship or struggles to get a good job, you're struggling not because fate is against you. You're struggling because you have programs in your subconscious mind that do not support that. So the first thing is this. All you have to say is you don't even need to go through psychoanalysis. As a matter of fact, I prefer you don't because that makes people worse generally. You don't have to go back in time to find out who did what, who said what and made you do this. It's unimportant because basically you got a program and you're playing your program. Who put the program in there? It's not relevant. You got a program. You have to say, so what are the programs? And then you look at your life and review your life and say, what are the things that I want that I'm having trouble getting? And the first thing I'm going to tell you is when you list those things that you want are apparently not supported by the beliefs that are in your subconscious program. So now you know exactly what you want to reprogram. Because you want to reprogram whatever's hard, you want to make that easy. So you already know what you're looking to program. So saves us a lot of time and aggravation not to go back over your history because your life is your subconscious. Okay? Now comes the critical part that you've been waiting for. So how do I change my life if it's not working right? Well, now it's time for a little side story. Because this side story, it will blow your mind when you understand what I'm talking about. It goes like this. Most everybody in our audience right now, Matthew, I hope, most of them are probably over 18. And I'm going to say most people listening at one time or another in their life fell head over heels in love with somebody. I mean, big time love. I mean, big. I mean, it was crazy love. And I say, go back to that time. Whoever that was, and it may have been a very short time. I don't know how long it was. I call it the honeymoon period, where the relationship is fabulous. And I say, were you healthy? And the answer is, of course you were healthy. And the reason, number one, is when you were in love, you were releasing all that good chemicals in your blood that was giving your body health and energy. And I say, you had a lot of energy. Yeah, you probably made love for several days without stopping for food even, and I say, was life really good for you at that time? And you go back and go, yeah, it was like heaven on earth. I mean, every day was so good. I couldn't wait for the next day. It was so beautiful. Now, I call that the honeymoon. And why is it important? Because that was not an accident. That was an absolute creation. You created that. And you go, well, wait a minute. It's like, I created that, then why don't I have it all the time? And I go, because here's the circumstances. And again, why is this important? Because if you understand how you created the honeymoon, then there's no reason why you couldn't have a honeymoon for your entire life and live over 100 years old with a honeymoon every day of your life, because you created it before. If you understood how you created it, there's no reason why then it couldn't be a creation every day. So basically, let's go back and say, what was unique about the honeymoon period? And this is interesting because now it's supported by some recent science too. And it goes like this. When you are fully in love, like that period called the honeymoon, your conscious mind doesn't wander. It stays right there in the front. Why? Well, life is so good. Why does it want to wander? It's like, if it's so great, why do you want to, disconnect and send your mind off somewhere when you're having the best of your life right there? So you keep your conscious mind there. What does it mean? For a period of time called the honeymoon effect, you were operating strictly from your conscious mind, primarily from your conscious mind, controlling your life. And why is that important? Well, that has all your wishes and your desires and everything you want. So you were making life decisions based on your wishes and desires. And guess what? When you were exercising your wishes and desires, that's when you had the honeymoon. And I said, well, then how come the honeymoon ends? And I go, because there's a point where life gets busy. And even though you're in love, you still got to pay the bills. You got to fix the car. You got your chores to do. And why is that important? Because the moment your mind starts to review your list, your chores, the things you got to do, it starts traveling. And I said, well, then if your conscious mind's traveling, I said, then who's running the show? And the answer is the subconscious. Well, the subconscious, it was, let's say, programmed by your mother or your father, right? And now your partner, who's been with you during this honeymoon and has only seen you operate from your wishes and desires and living the beautiful life that you really love, comes up and asks you a wonderful, simple question, but your mind, your conscious mind, is now thinking about paying the rent or doing something on the job. When you make a response to your partner, you're not now making it with your conscious mind, you're making it with your subconscious mind because your conscious mind's busy. I go, yeah, but who programmed the subconscious mind? Well, let's say your mom or your dad. I go, well, why is that important? Because you just made a response to your honeymoon partner, and it wasn't you who made the response. It was somebody else. And if your mom and dad didn't actually have that loving relationship that you were just having, and you played their program to your partner, your partner stands back in shock, like saying, who are you? Where did that come from? And all of a sudden they start like, well, this is a different personality. This wasn't even here before. And now here's why the honeymoon also ends, because let's say I was, my mind was wandering. My partner came up, asked me something nice. I turned around and went blah, 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 angrily, whatever, because that's the way my father may have done it, okay?
Yeah.
And then she looks at me with all like in deep hurt and says, what kind of behavior is that? Now here comes the interesting part. Remember I said, when you are in the conscious mind and the subconscious is running the show, you never see what the subconscious said.
Yeah.
You don't see it. So all of a sudden, you've just been accused of being somebody else or doing something that you didn't see yourself do. And so you, in response, take a stand going, what are you talking about? What do you mean? What kind of behavior? I've always been this way. The end of the honeymoon, man. It's all over at that point, because the honeymoon was based on two conscious minds exercising both their wishes and desires together. And the honeymoon ends when four minds are involved, two conscious minds and two uninvited subconscious minds with programs that are very different than the conscious minds.
Yeah.
And that's when the honeymoon ends. If you could stay in the conscious mind, then you could have a honeymoon forever and ever. But that's very difficult to do in the world that we live in. So you have to say, okay, well, let's reprogram the subconscious mind so that I just have automatically the behaviors I want. So that if I'm not paying attention, then whatever is happening would be still in my best interest with my wishes and desires, not my parents or my community's program. So I say, how do you do it? Now I go, okay, here's the issue. Problem number one. Conscious mind and subconscious mind are not directly connected. The subconscious mind is more like a tape recorder. Okay, it records programs and habits. Okay, the conscious mind has you in it, your spirit, your source, your identity, whoever you are. Matthew in your head, Bruce in my head. That's my conscious identity. And there's an entity there in my conscious mind, me. And I say, well, a lot of people say, well, let's change the subconscious mind by talking to it. And they try to talk to themselves, give themselves a good talking to. And I go, who are you talking to? Well, I'm talking to the subconscious mind. I go, who's in there? Nobody. I say, then talking to your subconscious mind is like having a tape player in front of you with a tape in it, and the program's running, and you don't like the program. And I say, go up and talk to the tape player for a while and go, come on, tape player, change. Come on, play something different. I don't like that tape. Play something different. And I say, how long will you have to talk to the tape player before it changes the program? And the answer is, you can talk to your blue in the face. It'll never change. And I go, exactly why it gets so frustrating when we see that we do a behavior we don't like and then try to talk to ourselves and say, don't do that again. And the fact is, nobody's listening. So it becomes very frustrating and time-consuming, and in the end, it just makes you more irritated with yourself because you keep trying to change the behavior and it keeps showing back up again. So it basically says, try not talking to yourself because that doesn't work. Okay, so I say, okay, another thing that doesn't work, and that is basically this. The other thing is that the conscious mind is creative, so it can learn from reading a self-help book. I go, cool. You read the self-help book, and I say, hey, did you know what was in the book? I'll give you a quiz. And all of a sudden, you take the quiz, you get 100. I say, good. You know what's in the self-help book. You read the book. You passed the test. And now I'm going to ask you, is your behavior any different? And the answer is no. I go, why not? Because you educated the conscious mind, but the subconscious mind didn't learn anything from that process. So the more self-help books you read, the more lectures you go to, the more psychoanalysis that you undergo to make your conscious mind more aware, that's really cool, except it does not translate as a change in the subconscious programs because that's not how the subconscious mind learns.
Come on, you've got us on a cliffhanger here, Bruce. How do we do it then?
Okay, so number one, how does it learn? Number one, how did you learn in the first place as a kid? Hypnosis. Your brain was in theta. It was in a hypnosis state. You bypass consciousness and go straight into the subconscious. So clinical hypnosis, hypnotherapy, especially good are subliminal tapes that you play at night. Remember I told you that your brain frequencies are high during the day where your brain's working, but at night it goes into the lowest one, delta?
Yeah.
Well, as you're going to sleep, that means you pass through the part called theta. That's the hypnosis part. So if you are listening to a tape every night as you're going to bed, that will automatically program your subconscious. Just repeat the tapes, and it will automatically, every night, your subconscious will pick up the program, and then it will automatically be programmed in there. Okay. There's another way of programming,
okay,
and it's actually a variety of new modalities that are collectively called energy psychology. And these different modalities work in different ways, but essentially they all create something called super learning. Super learning, if you're not familiar with it, people who are super learners are the ones that go into a bookstore, open up a book, run their finger down the page, and as fast as they run the finger down the page, they read the page. They can turn the page. It takes them longer to turn the page than to read the page. Okay? Yeah. If you can get your brain into a super learning state, that means, like the super learner, you can download programs in the subconscious. And so in energy psychology, a variety of them, my website, brucelipton.com, go to brucelipton.com. There's a resource page with all these different forms of energy psychology. You can look them up and see what appeals to you. And what it does is it gets the brain into a super learning state. And in that super learning state, you can download information straight into the subconscious. Point that's so critical is that with energy psychology, you can change beliefs that have hobbled you your whole life. In matters of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you can change a belief. So it's really cool. And then there's the other way, the most practical way that of training the subconscious mind is the way I said, it learns from habits. Whatever you do on a habit level and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, that is exactly how the subconscious brain learns. I mean, you didn't learn how your ABCs the first time you said ABCD. You had to go through it over and over and over again. Driving the car, you had to repeat it over and over and over again. Standing up and learning how to walk, you had to do it for over a period of days until you taught the system how to stand by itself. So you want to train the subconscious mind, then you engage in habits and you have to do it religiously, like a habit, not like, oh, I put a sticky on the refrigerator door that says don't eat donuts, and so every time I look at that, it's like, oh, now I won't eat donuts, right? It's like, no, that's not going to work. I'll still eat a donut because that's not a habit. Things that make habits, okay? And you say, well, how can I make a habit that would best serve me? And then I go, okay, now we combine two things. Remember I talked about being in the honeymoon state. And the honeymoon state is you kept your conscious mind focused in the present moment. Buddhists call it Buddhist mindfulness. That's another way of saying the same thing. And basically says if you can keep your conscious mind in front of you and keep it here live time, then you're making decisions with your conscious wishes and desires. If you can maintain this for a period of time, then what that will mean is that every wish and desire that's in your conscious mind will become a habit program in your subconscious mind. That's when, at some point, then not only are you living the honeymoon from your conscious mind, but if your subconscious has downloaded all those programs, that means your conscious mind could take a hike and you're still living a honeymoon. So that is the best way of doing it, and that's why being mindful and doing this. But you have to do something for this very important reason. You actually have to do a process. It's not, I'm just going to sit here and think about changing my subconscious mind. The reason is because you're thinking with your conscious mind, and it does not change the subconscious programming. And if we get that out of the way, then we could start to get down and do the business of change, which means you have to do a process. The three of them, hypnotherapy, subliminal tapes, super learning techniques via energy psychology, and learning to be mindful, stay in the present moment, and as long as you stay there, you'll be reprogramming the subconscious mind when you create habits out of your wishes and desires.
Fantastic. And what a wonderful way to wrap up the show, Bruce. I know we're pretty much out of time. But if you could just tell us a little bit about your books and where people can buy them from if they want to explore this a little bit deeper, because, it's amazing. And a big thank you for coming on the show as well. It's been great.
Matthew, I so appreciate it, and I hope people really get a chance to listen to this, because the way out of the problems that this world's facing right now is to recognize that we have to return power to ourselves, that we have to recognize that we have been systematically disempowered. This is not an accident. This is not a coincidence. I'll give you an example. The Jesuits are very fond of saying a couple of phrases. One of them is, give me a child till it's 6 or 7 and will belong to the church for the rest of its life. Or they would say something like, give me a child and I will show you the man. Both of these reflect something that they've known for 1,000 years, and that is, if you let me program your first 6 years, I own the rest of your life. And that's what happens. That's why they're saying, I program a child for the first 6 or 7 years to belong to the church for the rest of his life. And why? Because the program of church is in the subconscious mind. And the conscious mind says, well, I'm not really going to pay attention to that and all that, whatever, but it doesn't make any difference. The habit comes from the subconscious mind will keep you into that church anyway. And so the idea is the programming of us is not new. It's been known for over 1,000 years. And Tony Benn, member of Parliament, has said frequently a very interesting quote that says that a government does not want a healthy, intelligent population because they're difficult to control. And the fact is, we have knowingly been programmed by leadership for 1,000 years. So the idea is we have been systematically disempowered. And it's necessary to return power to get power back over our health, so we don't have to feed that big pharma corporate entity, to get power back over our health and our lives and start to create relationships that are long-lasting and durable, to recognize how we can create community. And with the power of community, take back the power of government again, because they beat us by breaking up the nature of community, and we lost that. That's always been the history of humans, to create community. So we need to reprogram. And the biology of belief is a book, my first book, because that was the basic nature of the new epigenetics story and the new programming story. All that's in the biology of belief, available at Amazon and most major bookstores. There's a couple of different versions in United Kingdom. I think Signet Books and Hay House each have a copy of it there. My new book is even more interesting because it's relevant to the moment right now. And my new book is called Spontaneous Evolution. And it basically deals with the fact that everybody is feeling, and they may not know that they're actually feeling it, but civilization is coming to a very rapid end right now. Civilization as we know it, we're going to go through an upheaval, and it's coming within the next year or so, maybe even by the end of this year. And the reason why it's happening is we're not sustainable. The planet's not sustainable the way human civilization is destroying the environment. That we are creating what is called the sixth mass extinction of life on this planet. 5 times in the history of this planet, life essentially got wiped out and had to start all over again. The 5 previous mass extinctions, which happened, like the last one, it was about 500 million years ago, were due to things like comets or asteroids hitting the Earth and destroying the environment and wiping out life. The 6th mass extinction is the one we're in right now, and scientists said we're losing species of organisms so fast. Listen to this as a fact, that if nothing changes in the way we're fishing today, by 30 years there will be no fish left in the ocean, and that's a fact.
Gosh.
It's like a concept of the planet Earth with no fish in the ocean is like science fiction, but it's coming to reality. We're losing species everywhere, but that also means us. We're going extinct. And what's critical about this, science says, it's due to human behavior, and the human behavior part is the part that is destroying the environment. So why is that important? Well, Albert Einstein had a very simple saying that goes like this: you can't solve the problems with the same thinking that created the problems. And so basically it says the institutions, the economy, politics, science, government, religion, these institutions that we've been following for the last few hundred years, their policies are the ones that are causing us to go extinct. And they're falling apart. The economy is falling apart big time. Governments are losing control everywhere. All of this is coming to an end for a simple reason, because we cannot sustain ourselves with that kind of world. We're going to have to come together and recognize that the evolution that we're facing is not the evolution of the human being. That happened 200,000 years ago. We were already evolved. The evolution that's in front of us is the evolution of something greater called humanity. And what that means is, remember we talked about a human body is 50 trillion cells coming together to make a unit called the human being.
Yeah.
And now we have 7 billion human beings coming together like cells in a body called humanity. So our evolution is the evolution of all humans recognizing we're all part of one superorganism, and that right now, when the cells fight each other in your human body, we call that autoimmune disease. And right now, humanity is suffering from autoimmune disease because we're killing each other, not recognizing we're all one organism. So new thinking has to come in now to sustain us as individuals, sustain us as community, that the new thinking is coming because the new science is already here. The old science that we built this culture on, which is Darwinian theory, which is based on competition, for example, is caustic. It's killing us.
Yeah.
The whole belief of you can rape the planet and take what you want out of it, out of the physical world, is ruining the planet. We have to recognize that Newtonian physics, which got us to focus on the material world, is wrong. It's quantum physics, which is the invisible energy world, that is primary. We should be dealing with our feelings, our emotions, our spirit, our source, and stop raping the planet, because everybody takes stuff out of the planet to feel happy. And the fact is, you don't need the toys to feel happy. You need good relationship. Then you feel happy. So we have to learn how to create better relationships in this world. We're coming to an end. And my new book called Spontaneous Evolution shows how the beliefs that are wrong, and those are the ones we're living by, have been already, there are new beliefs in place. Just the public is not made aware of it, which change how we will relate to each other and how we relate to the planet, and give us that boost that we need to stay alive on this planet. So spontaneous evolution is like biology belief, but here's what's different. Biology belief is how our personal belief affects our personal genetics and our personal behavior. Spontaneous evolution says but what if a million or a billion people share the same beliefs? And all of a sudden it's like, when that many people share the same belief, they create a world. And so basically it says the beliefs that we've created the world on are not sustainable. And there's a better way to live and a new way to get out of this thing. And the issue is we're coming to a crunch, and those that change their belief systems will survive, and those that retain the old belief systems are not going to make it, really. And it's time for change. So spontaneous evolution gives us an insight as to why the changes are occurring, what the changes are that we need to understand, and how we as individuals can participate in our own evolution and take the jump on the gun and lead ourselves into a more sustainable, happy, loving world, which is available to us as soon as we let go of the old beliefs.
Absolutely fantastic, Bruce. Look, I'm going to wish you all the best, my friend. It's been an absolute pleasure, as I say, and I do hope that we can do this again sometime soon in the future, Bruce.
I so appreciate it, Matthew, and I really appreciate all the listeners out there, because every one of us is involved with this evolution, and we get some better information. We have a bright and wonderful future ahead of us, so I want to thank you for that opportunity to talk to them, and wish everyone a wonderful, happy future, and it's happening soon. Thank you so very much. Bye-bye.
Right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Environment, the cells form bone, and I go back to the same stem cell dish, take more out, put it in a third petri dish and a different environment, and the cells form fat cells. And then I say, okay, look, what controls the fate of the cells? And the first thing is this: they were all genetically identical.
Yeah.
The only thing that changed was the environment. And when I change the environment, I change the fate of the cells, and that's a given fact of science. And it's a new science. It's actually what most everyone in this world has learned is called genetic control, which simply means control by genes. The new science, and this is work that I actually started in 1967, so that was like 44 years ago when I was cloning these stem cells. The new science is called epigenetics.
Okay.
And epigenetics, epi means above. So if I explain the new science, I say it's called epigenetic control. And I say, what does that mean? I say control above the genes. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you say, well, wait a minute, the genes didn't control. I go, no. And after all the years of being told that genes turn on and genes turn off and genes control all our functions, the truth is that all those claims are totally false.
Right.
Genes are blueprints. That's the first thing. Let me explain that.
Okay.
Why is it important? It's a blueprint to make the protein parts of the body, like the building blocks of the body. And so when you look in the mirror and see yourself, you're seeing a machine essentially made out of protein parts. So the cells are made out of proteins, and the different protein parts give us our different traits and our characteristics, not just our physical characteristics, but our behavioral characteristics. Okay. So now I say, the proteins give you your traits. And I say, yeah, but we have about 150,000 different kinds of proteins. And I say, because these proteins wear out, you have to replace them a lot and you have to make them. I say, where do you get them from? And I say, the genes are blueprints to make the proteins. So I go, okay, so the genes then make the proteins and the proteins give us our traits. I go, absolutely right so far. And then I say, but here's the problem. As blueprints, there's no such thing as an on and off. And why that's important is I say, well, look, go to an architect's office and she's working on a blueprint. You lean over her shoulder. You ask her, basically, here's a system that's supposed to be helping people. In the end, this country and many, many countries in the West are under a burden of a tremendous healthcare bill. And the reason why this bill is so high is because the corporate care healthcare system does not actually want to heal you because, as I said, it loses its business plan. So we're paying higher and higher fees. I just found out like a family of four in the United States 10 years ago paid $9,000 a year for health care. And today it's $19,000 for the same family of four. And that's $19,000 out of somebody's budget just for healthcare. So like, okay, we got a problem. And here's why I get excited about what I do. And that is, I was cloning stem cells while I was teaching those medical students about genes controlling life. And what that means is I would take one single stem cell and put it into a tissue culture dish all by itself, and the cell divides every 10 or 12 hours. And what happens is after about a week or two, I have thousands of cells in the petri dish, and yet here's the most important fact. all cells are genetically identical because they came from the same parent. Now, the experiment begins with this. I take some of the cells out of that main stem cell dish and put them in another petri dish with a different environment, a different culture medium. Cells are like fish. They have to live in fluid. That's why when you cut yourself and fluids start to run out, that's like an internal aquarium because your fish need to live in that. And I say, well, when I take the cells out of the body, I have to sort of give them the same kind of environment that they're living in. So I create an environment, culture medium, we call it, put it in a culture dish, and here's what I do. I change some of the composition of the chemistry a little bit, and what happens is I take some of these cells out, put them in a dish by themselves with a different environment, and the cells form muscle. And I say, no, wait, go back to the very same stem cell dish, take more of the genetically identical cells out, put them in another small petri dish, change the environment again, and with a different...
Tonight, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our extra special guest on the show, a man armed with an incredible amount of academic credentials, knowledge, and spiritual wisdom. None other than Bruce Lipton. Welcome to the show, Bruce.
Matthew, I so appreciate this wonderful opportunity, especially because we're going through some very exciting times.
Very exciting times indeed, Bruce. Things are rapidly changing worldwide and speeding up at an ever-quickening pace, and many people are awakening to the truth. And I think your work is absolutely fantastic in that it gives solutions and allows people to elevate through these times of turmoil.
Well, for me, it's very exciting because I started my career and was a university professor in a medical school teaching the conventional wisdom about how genes control life. And as a consequence, if you believe that, and this is what I was teaching, then realize this: as far as we know, we didn't pick the genes we came with. And if we don't like our traits, we can't change the genes. And there all of a sudden you start to realize that the genes control us, and we're more or less victims of our heredity. So if there's cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes running in your family, then we're programmed to believe that we are going to likely get those same kinds of diseases as a result of genes controlling our life. But what's really interesting, Matthew, is that in the process of teaching this to medical students, and here's the problem, just basically it says this, I'm teaching this to medical students, and this is how they ultimately as doctors relate to patients, is to tell a patient, for example, that their issues are controlled by their genes, and that they themselves do not influence their genes, and as a result, we make them victims, and then we also make them need a rescuer, and that becomes something like the pharmaceutical industry, who is very happy to stand in there and say, look, for a certain amount of money, I'll rescue you from your bad genes. Yeah. And what we're seeing is it's the most destructive form of healthcare in the entire world. I mean, the pharmaceutical companies are basically an unfortunate situation, and from my perspective, basically very immoral. For a very important reason, is that we call ourselves humans based on humanity, and the fundamental characteristic of humanity is compassion. And I say, well, great, let's talk about the healing industry, which is supposedly all built on compassion, and then you end up with this big corporate entity called Big Pharma, running the show, and then you immediately say, well, it's a corporation. And I go, yeah, and I say the basic fundamental pursuit of a corporation is to make money for its shareholders, otherwise it doesn't work. Yeah. And so I say, well, cool. So I say the pharmaceutical industry is here to make money first and anything else second. And why is this a problem? Well, I say, well, look, the pharmaceutical company is saying, I got drugs to heal you. And then I say, if they actually gave us drugs that healed us, how would that play into the corporate business plan? The answer, it would totally mess it all up, because if you got healed, then what do I need the drugs for anymore? So we're looking at a situation that we have an industry that does not want to heal you, because if it does, then the industry falls on its face and then the whole thing is over with. So we have an industry that actually is almost trying to make everybody an addict, and especially here in the United States, I can't believe the number of people that are taking 4, 5, or 6 prescription drugs every day. And it's like, when do they end? And the fact is, no, they never end. You take them for your whole life. And it's like, oh my God, they got a pharmaceutical monkey on their back. And here's the other part that's why it's immoral, because not only is it against the business plan to heal you, but it becomes immoral because I say, well, who are you making money from? And the answer is from sick people. I thought, Oh my God, sick people are already kicked and on the ground already, and now you come over there and kick them again to squeeze a profit out of them. They're already being punished by their illness, and it's like, this is why healthcare legitimately should be a non-profit organization, because it's designed to help people, not punish them. And the fact of punishment is no greater seen than here in the States, where this is a real number. 60% of Americans that go bankrupt to pay healthcare bills. So you say, is your blueprint on or off? And she'll look at you like, what are you talking about? There's no on and off. And it's basically it's just a blueprint. Well, a gene is exactly the same thing.
Right.
Point. Genes can't turn on. Genes can't turn off. Genes make no decisions. Genes have no awareness. So basically, after all these years of saying we're controlled by genes, the fact is, no, genes are blueprints. If blueprints behave the way we say genes do, then an architect could drive by a building site, throw the blueprints into the lot, drive away, and come back a month later, and there's the building. You say, yeah, the blueprints built it. It's like, no.
Yeah.
And so now I come back and I say, okay, how do the blueprints work? Well, now we know that they're read by a system, so that there's a contractor in your body. So
Okay.
now I'm going to back up 1 second, because I'm going to tell you this about our human body. So everything is going to make sense in a minute. We'll put all the pieces together, and it goes like this. When you look in the mirror, Matthew, and you see yourself, you see one individual human looking back. We say, oh, yeah, here's one biological organism, me, looking back at myself. And I go, okay, first mistake. The mistake is this, that you are not a one thing. You're actually made out of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living things. When I say me, or you say Matthew to yourself, you're a voice speaking for 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entities. The human body is a community of 50 trillion cells, okay?
Yeah.
Now, why is that irrelevant? Because I'm going to tell you, here's the next interesting thing. And it goes, you in real life are a skin-covered petri dish. Inside, under your skin, are 50 trillion cells, and there's a culture medium in there called the blood. So whether I'm talking about cells in a plastic dish with culture medium, or cells in your skin-covered human body culture dish with blood as a culture medium,
Yeah.
They operate exactly the same. So I go back to my culture dish with my stem cells, and I say, look, I change the environment, and I make muscle cells or bone